Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session on wealth building for high income earners. We're going to be talking about the high income trap, why professionals struggle to build wealth. I've definitely seen this over the years in my own practice, but here are a few recent data points to support this phenomenon. So rising prices in spring of last year, 2024, 27% of Canadians in the highest income quintile reported that rising prices were significantly impacting their ability to meet daily expenses. This is according to a Statistics Canada report. Paycheck to paycheck living, a recent survey from May by H&R Block, May 2025, indicated that 85% of all Canadians were living paycheck to paycheck. That's a huge number, a significant increase from the previous year, and this likely affects high income individuals as well. Financial stress and anxiety, a 2025 RBC financial flexibility poll found that over half of Canadians felt financially paralyzed, with more than a quarter reporting their finances were in constant chaos. It's pretty extreme. And many high income earners are not immune to these same sentiments. My name is Jason Heath, and I am a fee-only, advice-only certified financial planner at Objective Financial Partners. I'm your host today, and I'm joined by my fellow financial planner and cash flow planner extraordinaire, Thuy Lam. Thuy is a CFP with nearly 25 years of experience in financial planning, wealth management, and business consulting experience. She loves this area of wealth planning and wealth management. And Thuy, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Jason. Happy to be here.
You've been doing a lot of cash flow planning with your clients. Can you share what you've been seeing?
Sure, Jason. So the statistics that you're sharing are an accurate reflection of what I'm seeing with our clients and particularly in my practice. I'm working, it seems, increasingly with a number of couples and even individuals who, despite, as you mentioned, earning a high income, are really feeling like they're living paycheck to paycheck, struggling financially. They feel like they're not getting ahead. And most of the time, it is causing some form of financial anxiety, financial stress, and even putting pressure on their relationships. So there's a number of factors that are contributing to this.
I think it's helpful for people to hear this and know that they're not the only ones. I think sometimes you see a little bit of lifestyle creep to a certain extent as people's incomes go up, but nobody's immune. And what factors do you think are contributing specifically to the financial struggles of high income earners?
There's a number of factors, as I mentioned, Jason, and what I'm seeing mostly is to start off with the increase of cost of living, as you had mentioned. Increasing inflation and day-to-day expenses is really eroding the spending dollars for many Canadians and, as you mentioned, also high-income professionals. And so it's making it more difficult for these high-income professionals to save and build wealth. For example, the average family of four grocery bill has increased over 20% since 2019. So we're going from grocery bill of about $974 to now almost $1,300 in 2024. I don't have the numbers for 2025, but I'll tell you, I look at enough cash flow statements for clients that number is quite high. I mean, 1,200 is, I think, fairly conservative. I see upwards of almost 2,000 for a family of four. Yeah. And although inflation has slowed, big ticket items, I know because I just purchased a new car last year, but average new car prices have increased by almost 30% on a big ticket item like that. So, an average car back in 2019 might have been 33,000 or so. And as of last year, you're looking at 42,000.
Wow. Yeah. Tariffs aren't helping either.
Yes, exactly. And then the other factor that, of course, a lot of us are seeing and experiencing is increased mortgage rates on renewals. So the stats are showing over 60% of outstanding mortgages in Canada are expected to renew either this year or next year. And it really translates to about $1.2 million, or sorry, 1.2 million mortgages that are renewing alone this year, according to CMHC. So
I know I've seen a few where people still have these 5-year fixed rate mortgages they locked in at 1.5%, and they're definitely not renewing at 1.5. So
yeah, it's closer to the 4% mark. And so we're looking at circumstances where any extra cash flow that perhaps went to, going on a annual family vacation, that $400, $500 a month, and now family faced with tough circumstances because they still really value that time with their family. And that's I'm seeing a lot of that. And then on the investment side, Jason, I don't know if you're seeing it, but it's quite frequent with clients that I'm sitting with. Is just clients have, I think they kind of got on that roller coaster ride of the real estate market, and really looking for opportunities in real estate investment, and perhaps took on one too many. And so all these factors like renewing mortgages are impacting and really constraining their cash flow. What at one point was a cash flow neutral or even cash flow positive rental property is now adding to the cash flow strain, and really they're using their personal income to be able to supplement and pay for these rental properties.
and I think that's a sort of a regional thing. Certainly here in Greater Toronto area where we are, um, I've seen clients where their tenants, rents have actually dropped. They've had a tenant leave, and in order to get a new tenant, they've had to decrease the rent, but costs are going up. So it's, if it was cash flow positive or cash flow neutral, it's cash flow negative. And some that were cash flow negative to begin with, they're just more negative now. So
Yeah, exactly. And so that, and then they face, the situation of, at this point in the market, we know in some areas real estate prices and valuations are down. So I'm talking to
on
about
top of things, yeah.
exactly on top of things. So that adds to the level of financial stress and strain. And then more importantly, Jason, I think what I'm experiencing or seeing with a lot of high income professionals is, just, I think I call it not being in tune necessarily with their finances, um, whether it's lack of time, interest, maybe, the financial knowledge isn't there, but many high income professionals don't quite understand their financial position and where their money is going at the end of the day. And so they don't necessarily have a system in place to manage their finances effectively, to make sure that their money is working for them and supporting their life as well as their goals and priorities. And not having this roadmap really, and a demanding career leaves them with little bandwidth to, they may have the know how to do the research on investments, and maybe with their with help optimize taxes, but without a plan in place, money flows out just as fast as it comes in. And yeah, so many of our clients are expressing a need to have a roadmap, a system that they can just easily follow and execute.
hmm I think especially when you've got two busy professionals, busy couple, and maybe children that are keeping them busy as well. And I've certainly found over the years there's people that are very good at whatever they do in life, in their careers, whatever, very smart, very intelligent. But when it comes to money, a lot of people didn't learn how to make money decisions at work or growing up or whatever the case may be. And there's lots of professionals out there to help with investment decisions or income tax decisions or other things, but it's a real skill to be able to help with cash flow management. And you can't save and pay down debt if you can't keep your expenses below your income. So high income earners, what do you find they're doing, or what's their coping mechanism or their strategy with these cash flow challenges? What are some of the things that you're seeing in your practice?
Yeah, so I'm definitely seeing that they're quickly depleting any savings, emergency reserves. Most of them, to the point where it no longer exist, and they're actually dipping into investments to be able to cope with these cash flow constraints. A big number are taking on debt. So line of credit, home equity line of credits, and so they're eroding even the equity that they've built over the years in either their own properties or these rental properties. And a good number who land in our court, Jason, have actually tried budgeting. So a lot of professionals have attempted using budgeting software. They've tried on their own using spreadsheets, and they've just failed. I sort of equate this to putting yourself on a financial yo-yo diet, right? Like, really, who do diets really work, and are they sustainable over the long run? Are they any fun to keep up with? No, no. And then you put numbers in there, and most of us just want to run away. So it's not working out. They are trying. And then, worst case scenario, I have seen a small number of clients actually turn to family members for financial assistance, right? Or for the most part, they kind of cave in. So I have one client who, her father is retired, and he's pretty, financially okay himself. And she just she feels guilty about it, but caves into accepting his financial assistance as a single income household and with 2 kids.
Yeah, it's tough, especially in these expensive cities. It's tough for young people these days.
It is. Yeah. And so it hasn't been easy, but those are sort of the top coping mechanisms I'm seeing with high income professionals who are struggling today.
So those coping mechanisms, don't sound sustainable, drawing down savings, taking on debt, borrowing money from mom or dad or whatever. So in terms of a starting point for these folks, getting things on the right track, starting to improve cash flow, where do you start?
It's a good question. I always encourage people to try to identify the root cause of their financial stress, right? So they might be experiencing cash flow. I call it cash flow deficit, and be feeling financial strain. But where is that actually coming from? Most people tend to blame themselves and their spending habits, like automatically. People are, they blame themselves not being good with money, or, I'm spending too much. I need to watch my spending. I hear all sorts of blame and sometimes shame around it, especially if there's debt. But really, is it, get to the root cause? Is it that you are spending more than you make? Is it the impact of inflation and rising costs that we said? And it just means, sitting down and making some changes to your overall spending habits, and maybe shifting some of the spending numbers, or is it a combination? And then I also see, sometimes it's due to recent life events that changed your financial circumstances dramatically. Whether, we've seen it over the years, Jason, whether it's divorce, death of a spouse, helping family members who were sick for a period of time, all of this, and on top of what we're dealing with in terms of inflation and rising costs, it just adds additional financial strain. So get to the root cause to understand what we're dealing with, to be able to know what the solution would be. And secondly, I always do share that, just remember that money goes deeper than numbers. So part of that solution could be also transforming our money mindset, which really can shift the way that we think, we feel about money, and the way that we manage our finances and our spending habits. And then thirdly, as I mentioned, a lot of high income professionals may not be in tune with what's happening with their money. So, understanding, sitting down and really getting an updated, I call it a financial snapshot, right? So basically it's a true understanding of where you stand in terms of your net worth statement, your assets, what you own, and your liabilities, your mortgages, your debts, car loans, etc. So that's, getting a true understanding of where you're starting from and what we have to work with. And then on the other end of the spectrum, where a lot of more work will be entailed is taking a look at your cash flow, your income versus your expenses. At the end of the day, what's coming in and what's going out. And cash flow is usually the area where most people struggle to understand, right? Most people don't really know where their money is going and being spent or invested for that matter.
For sure.
Yes. So those, I would say that it's a good area to start is to really start to put together that information so what resources you have to work with. Is there opportunities for maybe some debt consolidation, trimming down high interest cost? Is there opportunities to move around cash that you have sitting, large balances maybe that you have sitting in your bank account and earning zero interest while you've got outstanding large credit card balances with 20% interest rates. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely opportunity spotting just looking at, the net worth statement and the cash flow statement.
Yeah, I'd agree. You see that sometimes where someone's got a credit card balance, but they've got a TFSA account, right? They're paying 20% interest and, they might hope to earn a 20% return in their TFSA, but pretty unlikely long term you can shift things around within your net worth to improve. And I think a lot of people have never prepared a net worth statement. They never put down on one page, what do I have? What do I owe? And I guess ultimately, that's part of the point of financial planning generally, growing your net worth, ensuring you've got sufficient assets to provide for yourself in retirement. When do you get to the point where you no longer have to work and your pensions and your assets are sufficient to provide for retirement? But I suppose if you get into cash flow planning and the trajectory is not good and you're going to have to work until you're 80, I mean, there's things you need to do and change in order to retire when you're 65 or 60 or 55 or whatever your goals are, right? And so what are some tips? What are some actionable things that people can do to help manage their cash flow? If cash flow is sort of the key to all of this, what do you do, Thuy?
Yeah, so this is where the work comes in and really need to be committed and ready to take on this I call it an exercise to make it seem a little bit simpler. But definitely I think it requires a deep dive and really doing a cash flow analysis. And that entails, reviewing. I generally recommend a year's worth of your spending, your expenses, what's coming in, but then more importantly, your spending. A few months worth. If you don't have a
Or is
year.
that literally going through like bank statements and credit card statements, like that nitty gritty?
Yes. So literally, and thankfully, a lot of banks these days, you can just download your bank statement and your credit card
The
statement.
data's right there. You can't hide from it, right? But if you don't look at it, then maybe it'll go away, I think.
Yes, I always I always share that numbers do not lie, right? And so I know it sounds overwhelming for a lot of people. Um, just remember that think of it as a one-time exercise to at least understand your current spending habits, where your money's going and how much is going
Where
to.
you're wasting money.
Yes, exactly. And if it seems overwhelming to do it manually, like downloading those, from your bank account statement, from your credit card statements, and trying to categorize it all, there are pretty good tools out there. They call them budgeting apps, but sometimes I recommend it to clients just to utilize as a historical, a look back, because you can connect your credit card, your bank accounts, and a good number of them do provide you with the history. And they even categorize your spending according to certain categories that available. So that helps to save some time as well. But key is understanding before we get started where your money and spending is going, and then once we have an understanding, then we have something to work with. We can start to, map out how we want this to look. And just remember that when you're doing this type of exercise, I encourage people approach your spending analysis without judgment, right? Be kind to yourself. It's too often that, as I mentioned, emotions get in and we end up feeling guilty, blaming ourselves, and that's, in the end, that's not going to produce positive results. Just focus on the outcome, focus on the purpose of the exercise is just truly, purely numbers, to understand where the numbers are going.
I can imagine that there are couples who might need a mediator like you in order to mitigate the judgment. You can imagine there's couples who maybe have separate credit cards or bank accounts, and all of a sudden the spending issues arise more for one than for another. So
Yes.
uh,
Yeah.
harder
Yeah.
to do as a couple than without having a coach who can walk you through this, right?
100%. Yes, that happens with couples, as you mentioned, and and that's why I love this work so much, because it really can unlock a lot between couples in terms of starting from repatching the relationship with money, and then the way that they might judge their own spending or their partner's or spouse's spending. So coming from a place of understanding and where that's all coming from, and then moving forward, being on the same page in terms of focusing on joint family values and goals.
Yeah, it's like financial therapy. So
Yes.
um, and so I've noticed some of these apps can get really detailed in terms of the breaking down in the different categories of expenses, and even in, if you're using them in a forward-looking way in terms of budgeting and monitoring each of these individual categories. Do you recommend this? Like, is it helpful to be able to really break things down, or is it more important just what you're spending on a monthly basis, for example?
Absolutely. I recommend breaking it down to categories for sure, Jason. Yeah, and I think it's all in part because I really believe in spending in a way that, as I mentioned, supports our own individual priorities and goals. And a lot of times the numbers and the categories that we're spending in reveals mismatches, right? So yeah, with our goals. So we can only be in the driver's seat and decide and make those changes to align our spending habits to support what we value and our goals if we know that there is discrepancy. But if we don't know, right? If we don't know what we don't know, there's no room for change. So I recommend, at least in the beginning, to take a look at also the categories. So I'll give you a quick example, Jason. So if we look at groceries and food category, for example, and we see that, $2,000 a month is spent there. And you might think, okay, food is a necessity, right? Groceries and food city, but it could be an oversight, and I've seen this a number of times. Like I can't tell you how common it is within or hidden in that category. A lot of times is, and usually the number is bigger than 2000, but, is usually a lot of Uber Eats,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot.
that's not groceries.
Yeah, so that kind of fits my tech clients. A lot of Uber Eats sitting, also takeouts, and as soon as they start to put together the numbers, clients, I don't need to say anything. They self-realize and say to themselves, "Oh my goodness, like I really value eating healthy for the family." And this is something that I want to change. I want to shift where this money's being spent. And sometimes it's not a matter of, reducing the numbers in a category. Sometimes it's shifting, if you know where I'm coming from. So shifting from Uber Eats to buying groceries, or maybe some sort of food prep service, right?
I'm sure to a certain extent there's people that can look at those categories like takeout or delivery or whatever, and if you look at what their grocery budget could be if it was more, quote unquote average, maybe that vacation they can't afford suddenly could be paid for with a few tweaks, right? So
100%. Like that just happened with the client last week. And so $400 freed up from, right? The takeouts, and yeah.
so what do you really value, So, and I think once you know where you're spending your money or where you're wasting your money, and everyone's going to waste money on something, right? I mean, it's hard to be perfect, but once you know where you're spending your money, Twee, what's next?
Yeah, so great question. So once you know, park it. And as park it, and then we start fresh. We start to explore, whether it's an individual or a couple, what we really value in life, what are our top priorities, and then from there we can peg what our top financial goals are.
A lot of couples probably don't talk about that on their own too, and there's something to be said about forcing those conversations to happen.
They don't. The way that I do it, and you're right, it just doesn't happen in everyday conversations. And the way that I do it, Jason, and the best that works for me is, I often do these chats on my daily walks. I'm not that I talk money on my daily walks, but I'll find a spot during our daily walks when I want to bring up these types of conversations. So that's my time. And then for other couples, I just encourage, like, if it's not yet a habit, create a new habit, designate what I call a money date, or money time together, where you can talk about good things about money, your goals, your dreams, your priorities as a family, and start to inspire conversations around the possibilities of how you can shift and see your financial situations improving, and being able to hit your goals. So that's where I start. And once once you've determined what your priorities are, and you've sort of worked on what the financial goals are, write it down, because that's powerful.
Yeah, yeah, it makes it real.
Makes it real. Write it down, share it with your significant other, share it with someone who, is important to you, that you want to, so it just makes it real. And then we can start putting a plan in action. So
I like the money walk, the money date. It makes it a little bit more of an intentional conversation than just a little, criticism or side comment in your day. And I think it's really important to talk about these things, and what one person thinks is wasting money might be really important to another person as well, if you can have an open, honest dialogue. And everyone's different. So I don't like the concept of having like a set budget for everyone that would or should be spent on a certain category, this or that. So how do you go about, creating a budget that's personalized and easy for someone to manage, and that isn't totally painful, and that is sustainable?
Yes, with that in mind and knowing your priorities and goals, we're now ready to create what I call an intentional spending and savings plan. And for some, that pay
So
down. But
savings has to be built in, right?
yes, 100%. So the easiest way, Jason, I've found to do this in my practice is, old-fashioned Excel spreadsheet.
So you use the app to collect the
Correct.
information initially sometimes, but
Mhm.
you then transition to spreadsheet.
Yes. So it gets input, historical spending gets input into a spreadsheet by category. Beside each column of spending in the categories, we walk through together, just like a couple or someone could walk through on their own. To like you just take a duplicate, you copy your current spending, duplicate it, and highlight in a different color. Whatever, I usually ask what a client's favorite color is, and highlight in a different color where we are going to start to do intentional spending, right? So we're going to now make conscious decisions to shift how much and where we want to be spending our money.
And that shift can be up or down, right? It can be reducing the Uber Eats, increasing the whatever, something else.
Yes, 100%.
So it's not all about spending less money. It's about spending money differently in some
It's
cases.
about spending money differently in a way that's aligned with your values and your priorities, and it feels really good. That's what I can share about this exercise. It's a very different way to approach it. And so, yes, we now go through and create an intentional or planned spending plan. And, in there, as you had mentioned, sometimes the numbers change, but we also have the opportunity, uniquely to kind of take a look at, especially high income earners who are facing, very steep marginal tax rates. We can just easily see solutions in terms of proactive tax planning, utilization of RSPs, income splitting between couples. So we see opportunities to also enhance their overall, cash that's available to the family
Mm-hmm.
by taking
For
a look
sure.
at, the
I
tax.
guess if you can spend $500 less, you can put $1,000 more into an RSP
Mm-hmm.
because that $1,000 is only $500 after tax if you're a high income earner. Like it makes a really big difference if you can tweak things a little bit.
100%. And it's going to make a big difference, in terms of their wealth building strategy in the long run, that compounding growth. And yeah, I mean, the other consideration and the other opportunity sometimes that I see is, people, um, they, I guess if they're spending more than they're making, what I'm seeing is some people are racking up those credit card balances. But then at the same time, they're stretching their cash flow and trying to make large pay downs on their line of credits, their home equity line of credit. But at the end of the day, what happens is they use their home equity line of credit to pay down their credit card. So it's this cycle that happens, but it feels good because they are paying down debt while at the same time, like what makes sense. It's, I normally, when I'm doing this intentional spending, savings, and debt pay down strategy, I actually back out first any savings and debt down payment to get just pure spending. So that's what I recommend. Understand pure spending alone on its own, and then what your cash flow position looks like. Then we can get you to working towards cash flow neutral and then eventually positive. Then we can start adding on strategies of debt pay down as well as savings and building wealth. So it's gradual steps, sometimes baby steps, and sometimes you can do a lot in just one sitting.
I'm thinking of a couple that I work with, and they have automated savings that they do, contributions to various accounts. They happen to have a corporation. They've got RSPs, TFSAs, RESP for children, and they've got so much money going into savings in so many different places. Invariably, they end up with a line of credit balance. We actually figured they were over saving. They were saving beyond what they needed to save to retire at a certain age, but they felt terrible all the time because they kept, adding to their line of credit. And part of the solution was just saving a little bit less, giving themselves a little bit more space to be able to maintain their cash flow. So, and so if you're going to try to automate things, you know, what do you do? Like, what's your advice to someone that's trying to automate things and trying to push this along to long-term cash flow success?
It's if you've gotten to a point, Jason, where, we're assuming now they've gotten to that stage where there's cash flow, they're at least cash flow neutral and created cash flow positive circumstance, then there's opportunities now to really automate things, from a savings and debt pay down perspective, right? And I'll touch on that in a second. But in terms of automating and building a system to manage your spending, that is key, right? To create sustainable new habits that are just like they're automated, and you don't even really need to think about it. So how I usually, there are a lot of ways, and I actually, and lots of tools to use, but I generally need to understand my clients, the clients in front of me, and what works well for them. But maybe like
Personalized, I guess,
exactly
right?
personalized. But I'll just share with you a simple method I use for myself, if that helps. When I entertained this exercise for our finances a little over 10 years ago, it was the point where I realized that, to be honest, I was just piling up stockpiles of clothing and food at that time. I'm guilty because I love food. And, at the time I really liked shopping. Um, and what really got to me was the waste that I was creating, right? For a family of two shopping at Costco all the time. Can you imagine like the 10-kilogram organic bag of flour that I bought because it was such a better deal than buying, the little bags from the grocery store. Um, yeah, and so I actually busy professional, and I just got tired of cleaning out the pantry every couple of months, and my closet, oh my goodness, it's just overwhelming. At one point I had 10 pairs of white dress pants, pinstripe white, this material.
We can't wear them after Labor Day anyways, so
Yes, and creating waste, which is just not in line with my values. So I did this exercise, and I knew where, my spending habits, where I wanted to shift that was not aligned, and how I easily automated it for myself, because I know I don't like to, I don't want to look at the details. I want to just be able to spend freely. So how I accomplish that is, I know that Costco only accepts MasterCard. So I took my one MasterCard and I said, okay, all my food as well as my shopping is going to go on this one credit card.
It's good visibility. Yeah.
And visibility, it's an easy way for me just to spot, and decide on, I call it implement conscious spending, but decide, at that is this really in line with what I want for my life? Is it important to me? But as soon as it became conscious spending, Jason, I'll be honest, it was not hard for me. Like the shift happened almost within like a few months, like immediately. And since then, I don't even need to look at that credit card for the most part. Like it can creep in every once in a while, but That's just one easy example. How for some it can be a little easier. Others, there's more complex systems that we would need to put in place. But for the most part, in terms of savings, it's the idea of paying yourself first. But for the most part, even before the investing and paying yourself first, it's establishing automation for your lump sum costs that can kind of, you know, surprise you when you get the big bill. Um,
Property taxes and insurance, and yeah, those big
Insurance,
ones.
vacationing. So the big ones, I tend to recommend establishing electronic envelopes, right? So a system where if you know you're going to spend 10,000 or 5,000 on your family vacation, set that money aside every month and move it from your checking to a high interest savings and nickname it, right? Nickname it. So have it disappear from your checking account or your daily banking and set it aside. So it's automating in that sense using electronic envelopes or what we used to call sinking funds to be able to more easily manage those large costs that can kind of, I guess, put you in a position of, oh my goodness, I don't have the money at the end of the day to pay for it anymore because I spent all the money that was in my bank account.
It's like those extraordinary expenses that people always say, oh, I had to, do my brakes, or I had to do this or do that. And they're not unexpected expenses. They're anticipated extraordinary expenses. They're always going to happen whether you like it or not.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I definitely encourage building that in and not forgetting about those large expenses. And yeah, and then at the end of the day, I think what's really important is now that you've kind of committed to new spending habits, automating, etc. I tend to recommend in the beginning to review your progress, after the first month, then after a few months. And then, once things are going smoothly, you can kind of move it to annual reviews. But, between couples, I encourage, ongoing conversations because it just really feels good to have the wins.
And I think it's great for you to share some of the things that you've done yourself, and even some of the mistakes that you've made as well. I think that's the thing. Even financial professionals are imperfect, and nobody is in any aspect of their life, including money. And I think it's helpful for people to hear. But regardless, if this all sounds overwhelming to someone who's listening in, what type of support is available to high income professionals? It could be the sort of thing that they could try to do on their own. It might be the sort of thing where they could use some help. So what support is available to someone who's struggling with managing their finances, or conversations with their spouse about their finances?
Sure, Jason. So I recommend definitely that they can consider hiring an advice only planner or coach who specializes in cash flow planning. And really just choose one who has a philosophy around cash flow management or budgeting that's aligned with your own and what you're committed to really executing. Because at the end of the day, you could have a plan, but it's only as good as right the steps that are taken to
That's
put
laid
it in
planned, yeah.
place. Yep, and the new habits that need to be created. And yeah, it's always helpful, to look for a professional, whether it's advice only planner or financial coach, but definitely look for a professional who has designations, the certified financial planning designation or other money coaching certifications. There's a number out there. There's really no standard in that sort of industry. But and then also coupled with experience, that's real life experience and having success helping high income professionals get to a good place with their money and feel confident. Because in the end, I really truly believe, Jason, that we can get to a point where all of us can ditch those budgets, when our spending habits are aligned with our goals and our priorities. And once we've got a system in place and a roadmap to follow, we really can start spending freely and confidently, knowing that we're on track to hit our financial goals and on track to building wealth as well.
I like that. That's the eventual point to stop budgeting. You start budgeting so that you can stop budgeting at some point. And then once you've got to the point where things are going well and you're on the path to success, I mean, how do you know that you're on track to meet your financial goals and building wealth? How do you know you're going down the right path?
Yeah, that's a good one. I get that question a lot, and the only way that I, feel really confident in answering that for any of our clients is really, to start that sort of comprehensive financial planning process and utilizing financial modeling software, financial planning software to start inputting, all of your financial snapshot, as we mentioned, and your ongoing savings, debt pay down strategies, but being able to model and see, 5 years, 10 years, and 30 years into the future. And that's how we can feel really confident in knowing that clients are on track to meet their goals, both short term, mid, and long term.
So I think for some people, this cash flow planning is really the foundation, the starting point for long-term retirement planning. I guess for other people, if they start down the path of retirement planning and find they're not on track, they have no choice but to do a little bit of budgeting and find ways to save more or spend less or whatever the case may be. So this has been great, Thuy. I think it's been a very helpful conversation. There's lots of different financial professionals out there. Some are experts in investments or insurance or retirement planning. And although I know that you've been in the wealth management industry a long time, you do a lot of retirement planning with clients. This cash flow area is an area of personal passion for you and something that you like to help high income earners with. And it's been great to have you and chat a little bit about it today.
Thanks, Jason. Yes, as you know, I love talking about this topic. So, yeah, thanks for your time today, and thank you for listening.
And thanks everyone for joining us today to learn a bit about the high income trap and why professionals, even financial planning professionals, struggle to build wealth. Thuy loves working with people who are struggling with this. Whether it's individuals, couples that are looking for an informed mediator. And if you have any questions for her, feel free to reach out. We'll put her contact info up on the screen for everybody as we fade out here. But thank you very much for joining us both today. It's been a pleasure.